Thousands of people have rallied in Israeli cities demanding government action for the release of hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. In Tel Aviv, Israeli police used water cannons to disperse anti-government protesters who also called for the removal of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. As the domestic and international pressure mounts on Netanyahu, a hostage release deal with Hamas, considered a terrorist group by multiple countries, could be within reach after talks between Israeli, American, Egyptian and Qatari mediators in Paris. And we're joined now by DW correspondent Tanya Kremer from Jerusalem. Tanya, this is the latest in a series of anti-government protests. Can you tell us more about last night?
Well, we've seen those protests, anti-government protests and anti-Netanyahu protests, you have to say, growing larger and louder in recent weeks. In the beginning, after October 7, after the terror attacks there and then the war, people were more reluctant to go out. They told me, at least, the protesters, and there were more calls of vigils and protests to call for the release of the hostages. And now we are seeing also more anti-government protests. And last night they turned violent with the police using water cannons and mounted police. There were also arrests being made. This sense is also reflected in polls here. More people are calling for elections. Also, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lost a lot of popularity. People are criticizing him for not taking responsibility for the security failures leading up to October 7th, but also they're saying there needs to be a change in leadership because of the handling of the crisis. This doesn't mean that people are against the war. A majority of Israelis supports the war, but they want to see that the government is handling this and bringing those hostages home as well.
Yeah, we mentioned the talks with several foreign parties as well. What more do we know about this hostage deal?
Yes, there were renewed talks on Friday in Paris with the heads of the Mossad, the domestic intelligence service, the Shin Bet, the Israeli intelligence service, and the CIA, and also the negotiators and mediators from Qatar and from Egypt. And on Saturday night, the Israeli security cabinet met. So according to Israeli reports here in the media, they decided now to continue those negotiations, to send mediators also to Qatar. Those talks had broken down a couple of weeks ago, and now it seems there is a new framework. Now, the details are, of course, not known, but there's talk about a phased release of hostages, up to 40 in the first phase in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. But again, the starting points are, from what we are hearing, Hamas has asked for a complete halt or cessation of hostilities, an end to the war, and complete withdrawal of Israeli forces. This had been rejected by Israel, but we heard also the Israeli National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi talking on Saturday night. He says there's room for maneuvering, for moving forward. So it's still to see whether this framework will work out this time.
DW's Tanya Kremer in Jerusalem. Many thanks for that update.